Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
Welcome back to WebRTC Live. I'm your host, Aaron Symes, CEO and founder at WebRTC.Ventures. At WebRTC.Ventures, we specialize in building live video applications, and we're here to help you take your video application ideas live. You can learn more about us at WebRTC.Ventures. Today, I'm pleased to welcome to WebRTC Live an old friend and colleague in the industry, Manik Sachdeva. I butchered it. I told you I wasn't gonna, and I did anyways. So sorry. I'm pleased to welcome Manik Sachdeva to WebRTC Live, where he's going to tell us about his work at Around and how they are inspired by and building the future of collaborative audio and video experiences. Manik is the director of engineering at Around and previously a software engineering manager at Vonage, where he's led the development of video APIs for web, mobile, and desktop applications. Manik, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate it. And don't worry about the butchering. I know you said it right the first time. So
the camera always does that to me. Anyways, thanks for your grace. I appreciate it. I'm gonna give you a chance here to put me on the hot seat because I've made some predictions in the past about meeting tools being dead. That, you know, we don't need to build anymore. And maybe it's just me being a little bit selfish in our work at WebRTC.Ventures that I'm trying to filter our business leads out to people with more innovative project ideas than just saying, can you clone Zoom for me, right? Now, in my slight defense, I did put a caveat in there that unless you could come up with a unique UI for a meeting tool that creates a better experience. So I'm happy to have you here today to prove me wrong. So I want you to give it to me straight right at the start. Are meeting tools dead?
Absolutely not. But meetings are dead. So this is what I don't like using meetings as a word, and you'll see why in my presentation today. So let me go ahead and share my screen to kind of walk through what I'm thinking about. So awesome.
Sounds great.
Well, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate you having me here. I really, my first episode on WebRTC Live, really great. We can make this happen. So I'd like to give a shout out to you and the team there to help me out. So hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well and staying safe. It's really great to be here. Today, I'll be talking about how we're building the next generation of audio and video tool with a focus on enabling collaboration. And that's really the key thing. It's the focus on collaboration, not necessarily the typical meeting that Aaron was talking about. Before we dive into Around, I'd like to give a quick take a quick moment back in time and talk about the history and landscape of video tools. Believe it or not, the first video experience dates back to 1870s, when a so-called image, whatever the form of image was back in the day, was sent over the wire. We then saw something being developed at Bell Labs in 1920s, where video could be sent in one direction and audio with two directions. And that really laid the foundation of video experiences today, but obviously not mainstream by any standards. You fast forward about 70, 80 years into the 90s and 2000s, we saw the launches of WebEx, BlueJeans, Skype, Viber, Uvo, the acquisition of Global IP Solutions by Google, which was where WebRTC was born out of. And now I've obviously skipped a few players here and there, but I recommend taking a look at the life-size history of video conferencing to go through the timeline. But the point really is video has been around for a while, dating back over 130, 40 years. All of these were great tools for their time, but never really a first-class citizen. Then came around Zoom, trickling into airports. You saw the signs everywhere, into our lives, into the education of students. Zoom was banking on its learnings from what could have been at WebEx, but wasn't. With the pandemic, it was the forefront of everything. But it brought us something that we know today as Zoom fatigue, a fatigue or a tiredness caused by being in meetings which are not creative or don't let us use our creative energy. And instead, it's a one-way lecture and not collaborative way of building. And in today's remote first hybrid model, the world needs something new for the next generation. This is where Around comes in. Around is the next gen real-time collaboration audio video tool. Now, a little bit about Around. Around started back in 2018, where our founders anticipated a remote first world. We envisioned the globalization of the workforce with more and more developers being remote and the co-location kind of minimalizing. And the pandemic only fueled that by years. Around is built for creators in mind. Our goal is to enable designers, engineers, and other creators so they can get work done through a high fidelity experience. And this also allowed us to tackle the video conferencing fatigue, where we didn't want the typical experience, but we wanted a lively experience. We wanted to give you GIFs. We wanted to give you animation. We didn't want to, unmute ourselves and say, hey, I agree. Instead, we gave you the thumbs up, which is like, hey, I agree with you. Let's kind of, we have consensus here. So as you can see on the right at the top, we have a lobby, which is like a home, my home where I can hang out. And then I can jump in and out of rooms, whether it's a personal room, an all hands teams room, and so on. And at the bottom, you could see the lively experience we've created. So, you can have a floating mode, a campfire mode, from so on. So on the left, we have the floating mode. On the right, we have the campfire mode. Floating is great for collaboration, where like you're hovering over an app like Figma or Notion. So you have a small screen and a circle, and that's my colleague Patrick right there. And on the right, we have a campfire, which is for daily stand-ups or meetings where you want to see most of the team. And we actually just released a neat feature where if you to actually show you how real a campfire is, we created a virtual campfire, which you have 5 people and you click in the middle and it kind of grows bigger and bigger. It's like a real campfire. You have to keep feeding it or it goes away. We really believe video is important, but there are times when people don't want to turn on a camera or simply have a minimalistic experience with audio, so they can focus on the collaboration that really matters. We've built around our audio only mode for just that. A great way to talk and stay connected while focusing on what really matters, the gaming, the design, and so on. Because audio is so crucial, we really believe in denoising and noise suppression. We've all been in a situation where there's lots of background noise, where we're on the road, hear a gardener in the backyard, a dog barking, children screaming, especially in work from home environments. We really believe that removing background noise and focusing on human speech is crucial to having a high fidelity audio experience. And we really, at Around, we're really focused on audio as well. So it's more than just video. It's an experience, and that's why we built EchoTerminator. Our patent pending EchoTerminator was built to ensure participants are enabled to create, even if they're not in the same room. We're entering a phase in many countries where people are getting back into the office while others are remote, and so we've built EchoTerminator. And the way we've done it, we've built, we're using a multitude of signals, including ultrasonic communication, our engine, and which identifies co-located users. We've got patent pending digital signal processing so that we can synchronize the experience completely, so that you have echo free while you're in the whole call and everybody's heard through their microphone. This means no more hardware. Simply bring your laptops and you're good to go. Now I'm talking about this, in a bit detail because we want to make sure that people can have a different experience. It's not a meeting anymore. This is a collaborative session where I'm on my laptop reviewing the same document as you. I have equal say, and it doesn't matter if I'm in the same office or remote. We're not all staring down a TV with some hardware in the middle. These are just a few highlights. We have lots of great features, but I'm not going to dive to it. If you want to check them out, go to around.co. And I want to kind of take the next few minutes to talk about our technical stack. Hopefully, Aaron, I answered your question about if meeting tools are really dead or not. One of the great benefits in our technical stack that we wanted to have was reusability. So we chose Electron to build our native application. So we have, and building a native application versus Chrome, the web application or a browser, there's key differentiators. When you're using a browser, you're tied to its release cycles, its API changes, etc. However, if you're building a desktop or native application, you have the ability to customize at all layers. So you can patch WebRTC, you can customize audio processing, you can customize real low-level code, so you don't need to worry about a breaking change happening at runtime when a browser updates, 4 weeks or 6 weeks in its cycle. On top of that, we get cross-platform, so you can build for Mac, Windows, Linux, which is also coming soon for Around. And you also have the ability to maximize code with JavaScript that we're using with Electron, Chromium, and mobile, and so on. One of the things that I, I wasn't there when we made this decision, but one of the things that makes a lot of sense for me as an engineering leader when I'm picking a technology, it's also really important to consider the talent pool. There's lots of great developers out there, people who've been working with Chromium and Electron, obviously hard to find, but and JavaScript. And so we actually, it's beneficial to pick a technology which has a lot of developers that can come and contribute. Let's move on to the next part of things. So our SFU. Now, a lot of you may have heard of Mediasoup. I just want to give a disclaimer that I wasn't around when we picked Mediasoup as our SFU of choice, but I got some insight from our CTO, Pavel. And just to give you more insight, the co-authors here, they work with us at Around. We were looking for an open source SFU. And obviously, there's many great options out there. But we wanted to really kind of work on an SFU because we didn't want to use an API. We wanted to own the technology so we can customize it at all layers. Great options out there like Janus, Jitsi, Meduse, just to name a few. But we found that Mediasoup was the right fit for us because of the way it was built. It was a powerful SFU. It had a great low-level Node API with the core processing done in C++. So all the heavy lifting done at the native layer accessible through JavaScript, and which made the barrier to entry much, much smaller. The API model was one of the big reasons we chose it. Mediasoup also supports cascading and connecting to other RTP endpoints. And so it's not just, it's WebRTC and more. You have the ability to use data channels and a lot more there. And, a lot of the times you get a question about evaluating performance. Now, at the time of picking an SFU, we weren't evaluating performance outright, but we're lucky, and I safely say we're lucky we went with Mediasoup because things are very performant for us. And if you notice, the community is pretty active on GitHub. They're extending the reach for developers with Rust out there and Rust bindings as well. And it really helps. And there's support for the VP8, H.264, VP9, Opus, DTX, a lot of these things that are really important in an SFU with low-level control. I wish I could talk about more, but there's only certain technologies I can go into detail about. But just to let you know, we're working with artificial intelligence, machine learning, digital signal processing, and so on. So if you're interested in joining us, we'd love to have you at Around. I really hope you enjoyed parts of the presentation. Happy to answer any questions now.
Thanks, Manik. And for those watching, please do put in any questions that you have into the public chat. I think there's a lot that's interesting around here. I mean, I do think that there is something here to the whole floating heads concept, and what I like about what you all are doing that does go counter to my point of my belief of meeting tools being dead is I think you're approaching the combination of remote and hybrid work that really is obviously the future that we're in now, that we're already entering with people going back into the office and being home. And admittedly, those are things I hadn't really thought about in terms of how that would affect the not just the visuals of the meeting experience, but I think it's interesting the EchoTerminator and the audio aspects of what you're doing. I'm curious, can you talk any more about the sort of ultrasonic audio aspect and detecting nearby laptops for that?
Unfortunately, it cannot. It's our patent pending technology. So I think one thing I will say is if you have a couple of machines or friends that you want to hang out with, totally recommend you downloading it and experiencing it yourself. I was in the office when I first experienced this, and I was very, very impressed. If you ask, Tom and Pavel, my colleagues who are there with you could see me. I got out of my laptop. I'm like, wow, this is really cool and neat. And I realized at that moment specifically, like how impacting this technology will be for everyone out there.
Yeah, I do see a lot of more ease of use there, right? It's not just the
Absolutely.
Getting away from can you hear me now, but not having to have the debate of whose speakers are you going to use, or headphones or anything like that, right? For improvements like that you've made, is that an example of something that was necessary for you to go the Electron route versus a pure browser route in order to implement that? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So our EchoTerminator feature, it's not nearly as well supported in the web. It practically is not there because we don't have the low-level control we need. So that is one of the reasons we wanted to be native in desktop. So, there's native as in building completely native with Objective-C and so on. We chose, Electron for the reasons I mentioned. But it does give us control. So we can customize things very specific for machines, for Windows, for Mac, and so on, which just the primitives are not there in the browser for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about ensuring low latency? I'm curious, what have you done in order to minimize people interrupting each other, talking over each other? And specifically, also, I'm curious, the sort of smaller video sizes that Around uses in that floating heads model, has that contributed to being able to be lower latency, lower amount of data that you're trying to carry?
Yeah, I mean, definitely lower amount of data, right? We optimize for that especially. I've done some talks in the past about optimizing for bit rates and so on. So that's definitely something we're leveraging. We want to make sure that we're only sending and receiving what you really need. You don't need to kind of send very high resolutions or low resolutions. We want to send the optimal one for your camera, for the device, and so on. So we definitely make some decisions there. And in terms of latency, I don't have that. I can't share the right numbers, but I think we're
Sure.
pretty good on latency, just the way we've managed our routing, and we have really great plans to kind of take that to the next level.
Yeah. The way that you're using color filtering in there, and sort of there's default filters on the floating heads and in the video in there, I think is a very nice, attractive UI aspect of it. But I'm curious if that's also a way to sort of maybe enforce, like I could imagine that by encouraging the use of that, you could also encourage a lower resolution video for lower latency. It's not going to be as noticeable, in that sense.
Yeah.
Is that true, or am I speculating the wrong direction there?
It can be true, but for us there's middle ground. We want to be optimizing for bit rates, but we don't want to sacrifice quality and high fidelity. And so even though we can theoretically do that with filters, and it's a discussion we've had, we want to make sure that what you see is really good quality for what you have at least. So sure. I completely agree that that's an option, but we have to find the right balance that works the best there.
Yeah, makes sense. Couple of questions here from our viewers. Andreas would like to know how was and is the experience for you using Mediasoup's SFU? How big was the effort to adapt it to your specific needs?
Now, I'll do my best to answer that question, but I kind of give a disclaimer. I wasn't around when this was picked. I have worked with SFUs in the past, so I'll try to do my best to answer. Like, I've seen different APIs. Personally, actually, before I joined Around, I was looking into Mediasoup just as a personal project as well to play around with. And for me, what I really liked was its Node API. I mean, you can really access all of the RTP layer in JavaScript, very low level. You can customize it. It's got a really nice model. So you have a router, you have workers, you have send transports and receive transports. So it's easy to classify, who's publishing, who's subscribing, and then the tracks associated with it. So it really builds on top of, some of the things that you see in the WebRTC API and its own kind of take on how eventing should be done and so on. So that's kind of one of the reasons I really like Mediasoup. And in terms of like deploying and scalability, I think when I personally started playing around with the Mediasoup, they had like these really great documentation and sample application, which I think I got running in my laptop within like 15 minutes. I was able to run like a local SFU there. So it's super neat. The community is really strong, and there's lots of people using it.
Okay. And follow-up question to that, Arjun asks if you had a choice other than Mediasoup, is there a different one that you would have gone down or investigated?
To be honest, I wouldn't say it's fair for me to answer that question because I haven't thought about it like really in that detail, because like what would it be, right? But as I mentioned, there's really great options out there. There's Janus, Jitsi, Meduse, just to name a few. But I can, if you want to, I can extend the conversation. I can take a look and come back, but probably won't be able to answer that today.
No worries. What about noise suppression? Terry would like to know if the noise suppression is done on the client or the server side.
Yeah, so our noise suppression is on the client side, but it's done the right way so that we don't have to add added latency. Everything is done in process. So we have our custom audio pipeline whole setup within around so that the experience is not taxing for the user as well, or like the latency added, or you kind of see this like we know you've seen other noise suppressions done being on the server side where things are done, but you could see like the delay or lip sync issues and so on. So we definitely wanted to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you run it? Do you know if it ran into any particular problems in scaling that to production? I usually ask if there were any challenges you faced while scaling Mediasoup.
At this point, we haven't faced challenges there. We have some ideas for scaling, but the traditional scaling concept of cascading is really supported within Mediasoup. So they really talk about that. They just got like a whole page on, hey, you want to scale SFUs? How do those router instances speak to each other, and so on. The documentation covers that pretty well.
Nice. Have you run into any limitations of what you would like to do or use cases you could do with around based on architecture?
In terms of what, like just like the user use cases
I'm
and thinking, so on.
So correct me if I have any of this wrong. I think so. Like right now, you don't have a mobile client for. I think you said that, and I believe there's also a 15-person max in calls. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I get your question now. So mobile client, the answer to that one is just keep an eye out. I think we're releasing very shortly, so it's
Right.
kind of right there. And then on the second one, about 15, we are looking into seeing, what other use cases we can unlock, maybe larger calls and so on. But we really see our users kind of in a collaborative space be very much small. That's kind of how we built the experience out, right? When you're collaborating with a small subset or group. And then I think going beyond 15 is a completely different experience. So, we'll reimagine that and kind of come up with something awesome there.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting use case point too. It makes me think of like the Amazon. They have the 2 pizza rule, or Scrum teams have a 8 or 10 people type of rule that if your stand up in a Scrum team takes more than 15 minutes, then that means your Scrum team is too big, right? If in a round your focus on collaboration, it's similar to me. It sounds similar to me there in the sense of if you want to call with more than 15 people, you're not really focused on a collaborative meeting anyways. And, maybe that's not the right thing for a round.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage, completely agree. Like I think when you're going over a doc, or you're going over like an architecture, or you're looking over code, how often is it like 6 engineers or designers maybe looking at the same thing, right? Very minimal, because then you come into this place where somebody's presenting, and then 80% of the people are just sitting there kind of listening in and not really focused, and that's kind of not what we want to promote. I think there is a place in time for larger calls within around, and we definitely think about different experiences that could be built out of it. And not just your typical like, hey, a team speaking with, the executive team is speaking and like 1,000 people listening. We want to build something much better and much more high fidelity with that. Like that experience has to be really great. It can't just be just the way we typically have seen it. Because that's really around is really focused on the experience.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I mean, that's part of why I'm kind of, asking the question, is I think it's really important to consider the use cases, and I'm personally of the opinion, not saying this is or should be the strategy for a round, certainly, but kind of in our client work, we always talk to people about what are the situations that the problems you're really trying to solve, the use case you're really trying to be excellent at, and not trying to cover necessarily everything, because that can drastically change the architecture and what you're looking to do. And I think with so many opportunities out there for tools in general, it's my advice anyways to our clients is always focus on what really makes you unique and what your unique problem you're trying to solve. And I love that collaborative aspect of what you all described. So back to a couple of viewer questions here. Ayush asks, once you were able to scale intercores, how much of a problem was it to scale it to multiple machines? Have you explored that yet?
So we're exploring scaling in an atypical fashion, and I won't go into detail there because we have some really creative ways to do it. But I think typically within Mediasoup, I think you would use pipe to router to kind of scale into different machines that you have. Let me copy paste this awesome article that the authors have written out there. So I think I can have the ability to send that over. So this kind of covers all ends of scalability. So you can talk about having multiple separate routers, or you could have a one-to-many broadcast. So, but I think pipe to router is the API you would call for intercommunication between Mediasoup instances and routers.
Okay, great. And so I think you've covered Danish's question as well, following up there about the pipe to router. Excellent. So I want to, and for those watching, thanks for the excellent questions so far. Feel free to keep putting them in the chat there. We've got a few more minutes. I want to come back to some recent news from this week and talk a little bit about Google I/O announcements yesterday, and in particular this Project Starline concept. So we're not quite to the point of teleporting together to have WebRTC Live episodes, but maybe with Starline we might be doing sort of, hologram meetings between us, not necessarily broadcasting them, but between us. I'm curious what you thought of that announcement, how that plays into what you see as the future of collaborative audio and video.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty awesome to see that. Kind of reminded me of some of the work that Cisco's done in the past as well. And I think everything is an iteration of something that, keep going and pushing the boundaries of. As I mentioned, video's been around for 100+ years in a way. So you always keep pushing the boundaries. Somebody has done some work and you see that and go creative next level. I think with the collaboration part or just the communication part, I mean, I would really love to be in an environment where you and I could kind of feel like we're exactly in the same room. And I think to really enable that, it's not going to be those big screen or mirrors. It has to be something that we hold in our hands. Maybe an iPad where I can, have a 3D model created about me. There's computer vision that obviously helps with that, and then use augmented reality to kind of make sure it feels like it's right there, superimposing, the human aspect and then the mixed reality. So I really think it will exist in our lifetimes. It kind of reminds you of playing Halo and teleporting through, one area of the map to the other and just having that conversation. But I think what the work they're doing is obviously probably not accessible to us in the near future. But I think it will allow other competitors to come and push the boundaries so that we will have it on our devices. Maybe, and I think somebody asked me the same, and I said I think iPad would be like the perfect device to kind of have that on. It's big enough where you feel the human connection, but not your phone. So yeah, looking forward to it actually.
Yeah, the key phrase there that you use probably is in our lifetimes, and I'd like to think you and I are both still relatively young, so it may be a while before we're doing these things ourselves, and there's plenty more traditional meetings as well as more collaborative around meetings for us to have between now and then. But some of those, really high, very, very rich experiences that Starline is kind of pointing towards too, I think are interesting. Probably more, I mean, I see it anyways, and kind of like the initial rollouts of that are the corporate boardrooms and the really high stakes negotiations where you want to feel in person, and you've got a company that can pay for that feeling of being across the table from the person you're negotiating with, or perhaps perhaps in a perhaps like a journalism kind of interviewing context, or even maybe there is a way that those conversations can be presented out as a more rich experience, or that sort of thing. It'll be interesting to see. But in any case, we do have a couple last questions here, and then we'll close out. But this has been a really great conversation, Manik. I appreciate it. If you can share, what's the choice of load balancer for a round, if any, yet? Danish asks.
To be honest, I don't know the exact one we're using, but I can come back to you. That's definitely something we can come back.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe similar, Ayush is asking about HA proxy for load balancing, or
we're built on top of AWS. Yeah, we're built on top of AWS, so we're definitely leveraging what's available within AWS from this instances, but we're not really, looking into managed services at this point. We want to kind of build something that we can build ourselves end to end in that sense. So I think that'll give you a good insight on how our ideology is for building our infrastructure.
Excellent. Excellent. And some kudos here from Arjun, just saying that Round has one of the best user interfaces and features they've experienced. What are the next features you're looking to launch?
Thanks, Arjun. We're, as I mentioned, we have the mobile app coming out soon. We're working on Linux. We've got, a new audio only mode and a better extent to that, and a few more futuristic extent to that coming out as well. So we're kind of evaluating lots of these great things. I think the next question I saw about the concurrent calls, since I can see it myself, I'll just jump into it. Right now, how many concurrent calls can be supported for video calls? I think it really depends. For Around, as Aaron mentioned, we have a limitation because our focus is on collaboration for now. And but if you want to build with Mediasoup, you could create like a cascading SFUs, and you could have many users. You could build the whole one-to-many broadcasting aspect, or like a multi-party. So it really depends on how willingly you are to deploy your infrastructure with as many instances as possible.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right. Well, sounds great. Thanks again for joining us today, Manik. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure to include the link that you posted when we post this online as well. Before we close out, you want to make another pitch for job applicants at Around? And in fact, before you do, I'll say I know people who have worked with Manik before, miss working with him, and really you've been a great person that we've worked with before, and I know a number of people who really enjoy working with you. So I certainly encourage people apply for those positions too. You'll love working with Manik, and I'm sure the rest of the team there at Around. But what else do you want to add on there?
I just want to say a big thank you. Thanks, Aaron, for this, for the kind words. Really appreciate it. We're hiring for DevOps, SDET. We really believe in quality from code level to the quality that you see in your video calls. We're hiring for front-end engineers, product managers, WebRTC engineers. So we're hiring all across the board. So if any of that seems interesting, I think you can drop me a line, and I'd love to get in touch with you. And again, Aaron, thanks for hosting us and me and Around, I guess. I really appreciate the time.
Oh, my pleasure, absolutely. And thanks all of you for joining us today. We'll post a recording of this to YouTube soon, and also our blog at WebRTC.Ventures. To learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live, or to suggest a topic for an upcoming episode, just follow us at WebRTC.Ventures on Twitter. You can join our email list also at WebRTC.Ventures. Thanks again, Manik. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Let's make it live.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.Ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services, and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.